Welcome back, everyone, to our recap episode for this week of the College Sports Hive. That is Leif and I am Scott Stevens. We're back again to break down what happened over the weekend of college football for everyone, and talk about the games, talk about things that we saw, and then offer up our pick results at the end of the show to kind of see where we're at so far this season. So we'll recap the four games that we previewed for you all. That's going to be Ohio State, Indiana. What a thriller that turned out to be there in Columbus, Wisconsin at Northwestern, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma, and then USC at Utah. And then we'll offer up a few other notes of games that we saw that were interesting and other things that happened throughout the grand spectrum of the weekend and the rankings and all that good stuff. So, and then like I touched on, we will offer up what happened with the picks over the weekend. I had a rough one. I had a rough one this weekend, and that's all right. But it is what it is, and we move on. We'll get into that at the end there.
I think your picks were misleading of how well you predicted the game being close, though. I will give you that.
Well, I appreciate anything I can get at this point. But with that being said, we'll jump into the recap of the Ohio State Indiana game. That was number 3 Ohio State at home taking on number 9 Indiana. The Ohio State ended up winning the game 42-35, but it was a thriller that went to the very end. Indiana had a chance with the ball at the end there and just wasn't able to convert on 4th and 10. But that Indiana defense, like I touched on in the preview, was able to make plays to make Justin Fields look a little bit more mortal and more human. He only went 18 of 30 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns and threw 3 interceptions in this game, which has matched his career total at this point so far in his time at Ohio State. So impressive play by the Indiana defense, but Ohio State still scored 42 points in this game. What do we make of what happened here between the Buckeyes and Indiana?
I think the headline is that Fields looked more than mortal. I mean, if you tell me he had 60% completion rate and 3 interceptions, and you remove the name Justin Fields or the Ohio State Buckeyes, I'm going to tell you that team probably lost. So I think mission accomplished by Indiana. I think it was just preventable mistakes, and even when they were clawing back in the game and had positive plays, they were like plays that held them back. And one of the biggest one that stuck out to me was running a return back and getting the ball punched out, and now it's Ohio State ball again after a huge play where you're at the 20-yard line if you get tackled right there, and that's a totally new game. And then at 35-21 or 21-35, Indiana's got the ball, and then there's a pick six, and Sean Wade takes one to the house. And now it's a 21-point game, and there was a chance. So if you take away some of those type of mistakes, Indiana very well could have and maybe should have won this game. It felt like Ohio State's mistakes were less costly, as many as there were, and there were mistakes, that their mistakes were less costly, and they ended up winning the game. And Penix was the better quarterback. It's just that some of the mistakes that happened by the entire Indiana team were game-changing mistakes.
Absolutely. And you look at this game and you saw Ohio State up 35-7 at the half. And you're looking at this, and we were texting about it like, oh, this game's over. Like, there's no way Indiana competes anymore. Like, they had it 7-7 for a while. And then Ohio State always finds a way to flip that switch right before halftime, steal some possessions, and set their team up for success going into the break. And then it was 35-7 at halftime, and you're sitting there like, holy crap! Like, this was supposed to be a fantastic game. They look so flat. That whole first quarter, Indiana's offense didn't seem to get off the bus. They didn't seem very, very explosive, ready to go, or anything like that. And then next thing you know, Penix Jr. just starts throwing the ball downfield and making big plays to keep Indiana in this game. They scored first off after halftime, to cut it to 35-14. And then ever since that play happened and Indiana was back in the game, it felt like they had a chance from there on out. You just felt the momentum build and build and build with this Indiana team, and they're very much a momentum-based team. I think they play well, and they're both all facets of the game are playing well. And if one side is struggling, they don't necessarily rely upon one one aspect of the game to win them a football game, not necessarily their defense or their offense. It's a combined unit effort to keep that momentum rolling on both sides of the football, in my opinion. So you felt that starting to happen. The defense started playing better again. You saw the offense make plays. And then you see Michael Penix's final stat line, and 27 of 51 looks kind of ugly, but 491 yards, 5 touchdowns, and that one costly interception, which did end up being a touchdown for Ohio State. And you could look at it and say that could have been the difference in the game.
Yeah, I think Indiana is a really opportunistic team, both on offense and defense. Like you see Penix's stat line, but then you see Ty Freifogel is wide receiver, 7 receptions, so nothing crazy for the amount of pass attempts, but he had 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that means almost half of his receptions were long touchdowns, if not both. So that's really opportunistic. On defense, they get a lot of big plays. They're kind of ball hawks in the secondary. They got one where they got batted it around, and Jerome Johnson, the defensive lineman, gets a pick. I thought that they're kind of a big play team. They're not necessarily the most stout. Like, you don't know what you're going to get. They're not going to be the most steady, but they make big plays, and it carries over to the other side of the ball. And whenever the offense plays well, it feels like the defense makes a big play, or vice versa. And it was a shame that earlier in the game that neither when the defense made big plays, that the offense seemed a little flat. They even had nice drives where they stalled on a missed, like, easy dump off to Freifogel in the first quarter that I thought could have been a big turning point. And I kind of watched it and said, oh, darn it, like, they don't look like they have enough to beat Ohio State. And then the second half happens, and they look like they had – if they could have played both halves like the second half, this game wasn't going to be close. They played great, but I don't know. They dug themselves too much of a ditch to climb out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's so impressive to see a team just believe in themselves the way that this Indiana team believes in what they're doing and what they've built and what Tom Allen's doing over there with that program. And he just has them believing so much in themselves that they know that regardless of the hole that they get themselves into, they're never out of a game. So that was very evident. And it's very one of those things you see in college football that makes you admire, regardless of whether you're a fan of the team or not. It's a belief in yourself as a player as well as in the program that you're never out of a game. So I did love to see that from the Indiana side of things. But let's flip the script and talk about Ohio State, because Justin Fields, as mortal as he looked, he still played very good football at times in this game. There was times where he hit probably the most adversity I've ever seen him face in his time at Ohio State as the starting quarterback. And he bounced back. He made plays with his legs. He made plays with his arm to build that 35-7 lead, and basically ensure that they only needed one touchdown to basically win this game in the second half. So let's talk about his performance a little bit, as well as the rest of that Ohio State offense.
Yeah, I'm stunned how well Ohio State comes out of game, like into the game, and they go to the house in a minute. Like Garrett Wilson catches one ball deep, and then he goes another ball up the middle, and now you got a touchdown. It's so impressive, and so you see, like, oh boy, they're rolling, and then he's faced with adversity, and he still continues to make the plays to get them down the field and be able to score 42 points. And then Master Teague, when they needed to run to throw off that defense who's so opportunistic, like I touched on, Master Teague came up big and had a really good game. He had 26 carries for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Trey Sermon added 78 more yards out of the backfield. So their run game was a really important factor, so the defense couldn't keep blitzing, and which seemed to rattle Fields a little bit at times.
Absolutely, the running game was humongous in this game for Ohio State. You've heard out of their camp a lot of times that they're looking for someone to replace J.K. Dobbins. They're looking for someone to have that explosive caliber in the running game. And Master Teague sure looked very good in this game. He's a massive running back. He's huge for the position. He scores touchdowns. He's fast. He's athletic. And this is something that Ohio State needed to see. They needed to have a little bit more balance. And when it was great that it happened in this game if you're in the Ohio State camp, because Justin Fields didn't have his best game, and he still had a decent game, but let's face it wasn't his best game. And so then you have Master Teague be able to step up and be like, I can shoulder some of this load as well and keep us moving the football and keep that Indiana offense off the field when they were just absolutely rolling in the second half. Like, Indiana would score on 3 straight possessions and not blink an eye. And you're just like, wow, this Ohio State team needs to keep them off the field. And so like it was very intriguing to see how that all played out. Massive that Ohio State was able to run the ball as well as they did. I don't think if they were able to run the ball that well, they would have had nearly the success that they saw. But I want to touch on an interesting point that I've made to a couple people now about this Ohio State team and head coach Ryan Day, and I want to get your opinion on it as well. I don't think I've ever seen a football team be more dominant from 10 minutes left in the second quarter to halftime to ensure that his team has last possession, that they're absolutely going to have the ball last before the half, regardless of whether or not they're going to get it after halftime or not, and then stealing possessions for your offense, getting scores, and just kind of it's demoralizing the way they do it. But like instead of a 14-7 game or a 21-7 game, they're up 35-7 at halftime, and it's just you look at that and you're like that's insurmountable when you look at Ohio State's offense. And so I think the way that they're able to manage the clock and manage the game to ensure that they have the ball last, but also they're scoring to put themselves up by a bigger margin at halftime is one of the I don't think I've ever seen a team do it better, quite frankly.
It's really impressive, but what's interesting is it's like they have these methodical drives, and then like so I mentioned they start off the game with like what seems to be every single game they start out with a really long, fast touchdown drive. Penn State, this game, any big game, they come out guns a-blazing. Then they have a methodical drive that seems to happen somewhere in the second quarter or second or third drive of the game, and then they steal a possession, like you said, whether it's a turnover or they force a 3-and-out, but they're aggressive with their timeouts and play calling. So now they have more time for their offense, and then they go score fast and somehow steal another possession. I've seen it numerous times. I never really thought about it or verbalized it like you did there. But no, I agree. I think I've never seen a college team that can steal possessions on defense and score really fast. You see a lot of up-tempo teams like Chip Kelly's Oregon, where that whenever they'd get a stop, it seemed like they were trying to run it down your throat and score again. But it wasn't as meticulous and methodical and well thought out as it seems to be with Ohio State, because it seems like almost every game they are the team with the ball at the end of half. And whether they get it coming out or not, but they seem to be scoring at the end of half, and that usually adds to a lead or at least makes a game close if they're down, which they rarely are.
Absolutely. This was such a great way to kick off the college football Saturday for everyone watching. It was just a phenomenal football game. It was one of those that you just sat back at the end and were like, wow, that was just filled with talent, filled with gutsy plays, filled with belief. It's everything you wanted in a college football game other than the atmosphere. And so it was such a good football game. Once again, that was Ohio State winning 42-35 over a gutsy Indiana team. One last thing I want to ask you about this is what do we think about where Indiana falls in the rest of the rankings and things moving forward for the rest of the year, sitting there with now one loss, but that's a pretty good loss. Like it's not I don't think that should necessarily ding them up too much. Where do you think they should fall into?
I think that loss was more impressive than any of the teams directly following them's wins. Oregon eked out a win against the banged-up UCLA team without their starting quarterback. Miami didn't play, and Georgia won by a touchdown, a single score over a bad Mississippi State team. I agree. I don't think this will hurt them at all. I honestly would be slightly surprised if they actually fall in the rankings at all. And I mean, that could be wrong because they got to prioritize winning, but like a loss against Ohio State, especially this tight of a loss, I don't think it should hurt them at all. And I think they really still have a shot at a New Year's Six bowl.
Absolutely. I think it was such an impressive game in their performance and everything there. I think you look at it and if anything, they proved their legitimacy more than anything else, rather even with the loss. So I think there's a lot of people asking the question if they even belonged in the game against Ohio State, if they were just going to get boat raced, and a lot of that grumbling came out at halftime when they were down 35-7, and they just showed that never say die mentality, and I think they proved exactly who they are and what that program is becoming up there in Indiana under Tom Allen. So I don't think that'll hurt them too much, like we touched on, and what a game that was to open up the football weekend. A little bit more of do you have anything else to add before that?
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Tom Allen for Coach of the Year. You think that's going to happen? I started thinking about it. I saw that, like, I know it's published and everything, but that speech he gave at halftime, like never say die attitude and embodied. I know it's like popularized and everything, and it probably happens more than what we see for every single game that a team's down. That the coaches are going to give you their best speech. But his team came out and did that. They beat a Penn State team that obviously at this point hasn't been good, but they were supposed to be. They've done everything right, and they weren't necessarily supposed to be in this position. So I think I'm gonna say that I think he's deserving of the spot as Coach of the Year. I'm kind of hoping he gets that spot.
Yeah, like just racking my brain quickly. No one really comes to mind other than him. I think, yeah, I would have to sit down and think about it a little bit deeper, but I think he's clearly a front runner. I think you look at maybe Luke Fickell with Cincinnati. You look at maybe Hugh Freeze with Liberty, with the way they've bounced back, but they just lost. So some interesting things there. And like you think of some of those names, but then again, like you haven't seen any, like, Indiana had a chance to be the first team ever in the Big Ten to beat Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State in 1 year. And they were a touchdown away from doing it. So you look at these performances and like, these are the class of the Big Ten. I know Penn State and Michigan are not having good years, but they are still prestigious programs. And people look at them to be the pillars of success in this conference, and which is probably one of the best conferences in football. So it's very telling what he's doing there, and clearly what he's doing is working. And so I think you have to put him at the very top of that short list of names that comes to your head when you think about it. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to give that a thought because I was someone I was thinking of, but I wonder. I'm very curious to see if he gets it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and I think there's not a lot of better options out there as of right now. Maybe a possible one here is Pat Fitzgerald there with Northwestern. That's a pretty good transition that we were able to present you there. Northwestern did knock off number 10 Wisconsin in that Big Ten West semifinal, technically, as ESPN and ABC like to put it this weekend. Final score was 17-7. I asked you the question when we were doing our preview if either team gets above 20, and we said we thought they would, but we also didn't think that we'd see that sort of slog and inability of explosiveness on offense that we saw out of Wisconsin.
What I'm surprised about is there's a couple things in this game. One was Wisconsin threw the ball so many times, and so did Northwestern. Wisconsin threw the ball 41 times, and Northwestern threw it 44 with Ramsey, and they also had a trick play for another throw. So 45 times and 41 times throwing the ball. And these are two very ground and pound teams. Like, they embody what the Big Ten is known for as a ground and pound conference. And then secondly, I don't think I've ever seen a Wisconsin team to have 5 turnovers. There's 3 interceptions by Graham Mertz, and I guess that's not surprising. They only scored 7 points if you turn it over on 5 possessions. But I was frankly stunned that happened based on what I'd seen previously from both teams. They both took care of the ball exceedingly well, both historically and this season, especially Wisconsin. And then to see that many turnovers was stunning. And the running game for Northwestern was completely shut down. So they had to throw, which would have told me if I saw that, like, that they only ran for 24 total rushing yards, if I remember correctly. 23 rushing, 24 yards on 23 carries. That if I saw that, I would have absolutely told you Wisconsin was going to win this game. And then you see 5 turnovers, and that flips the script entirely. So kudos to Pat Fitzgerald and his group. Their defense came out and balled out. They had 2 tacklers with 14 and 13 tackles respectively. And I was impressed, but I was discouraged by Wisconsin's display at the same time.
Yeah, we touched on in the preview of Peyton Ramsey having 4 interceptions already on the season, and only 6 touchdowns coming into this game. He threw for 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, and we said Graham Mertz only had 11 incompletions through 2 games and hasn't thrown an interception. He was taking care of the ball so well, and then he comes in here and makes 3 bad decisions and 3 bad throws that had costly turnovers for this Wisconsin team, where points were so precious in this football game, and you throw 3 interceptions and then you add in 2 fumbles on top of that, and it's it's a backbreaker. Like we saw it. We'll touch on it a little bit further down the line with the Utah USC game, but just turnovers and losing the turnover margin even by one can kill you, and losing it, let alone by 5, is just nuts. It's not something that you're going to be able to come back
And
from.
this could have been worse for Wisconsin. Like 17-7 based on 5 turnovers and a fair amount of them in their own territory is fairly tame. Northwestern had a chance to punch it in from like the 1 and fumble the snap. So it seems to me that we haven't seen enough, and this could have just been probably is an anomaly. My goodness, I can't speak today. It probably is an anomaly. But that said, it's an unforeseen thing, and that's what makes college football so fun to watch. But I feel bad for Wisconsin a little bit because they really showed some great things in the 2 games, and then they had 5 turnovers, which probably won't happen again for another 20 years for a Wisconsin program that prides themselves on taking care of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. But their defense was a huge story in this game. That's why it was why it was only 17-7, is they played so well. Northwestern wasn't able to establish the run, wasn't able to do that. And if you make if you make a Northwestern team throw the ball 44 times to beat you, most often you probably win the football game. Nothing against Northwestern. They're just not really built that way to play that style of offense. So, but then again, Peyton Ramsey took care of the football. He didn't throw an interception, and so that's a huge difference in this game as well. And so you look at this game, and their defense was the teller of keeping this game close in that 17-7 range.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to touch on is the entire game. You felt that Wisconsin had a chance as long as they could break one big play. And we talked about Wisconsin's defense keeping them in the game, but Northwestern's defense kept their foot on the pedal, not allowing Wisconsin to have any big plays or what's felt like any big plays at all. Like you saw like a 15-yard throw followed by a stuff on the run, which just doesn't happen to Wisconsin. Like they never get no gains or a loss of ones, very, very rarely. And it felt like it happened every single drive multiple times. So I really just wanted to commend with Northwestern, especially their linebackers, Blake Gallagher with 14 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, and Patty Fisher, 13 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. They played the game of their lives, and kudos to Northwestern. Like, what do you make of their chances going forwards?
Well, I mean, the path's clear in front of them. If they keep winning, they're going to win the Big Ten West, and so that's a huge hurdle that they just stepped over there by beating Wisconsin. And as of right now, they're a clear favorite to win the Big Ten West and to take on Ohio State, who is now the clear favorite in the Big Ten East after beating Indiana. So you look at this, and I'm not necessarily sure after this performance if I'm ready to say this Northwestern team can play with Ohio State, but you look at that, and like we said last week that we think Wisconsin can play with Ohio State. And so we saw like you touched on, kudos to Northwestern for being able to keep that pressure on this Wisconsin team. And I think it's almost a little bit like the Indiana situation where people sleep on this program a lot in the game. And this is not going to be the first time that we see Northwestern play for a Big Ten championship in recent memory. So you look at this program, and they haven't ever really gone away. They just have had some down years in between some very good years. And so as of right now, they're on one of those very good years, and they have a lot of talent on both sides of the football. And I think, who knows? You put them in a game against Ohio State for a Big Ten championship game. We don't know what to expect yet. They're both 4 games in so far in the year, and so yeah, it's I'm sorry, I think Northwestern's played 5, but yeah, it's early to tell. But also at the same point in time, it's only like 3 weeks away before that's probably going to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But clearly, they're well on their way to representing the Big Ten West in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, it's a gift and a curse, this shortened schedule, because then you have less trials, but like 1 loss. Now Wisconsin's season's basically over, especially because they had the coronavirus stuff. So they've only played 2-3 games now. And so it made our proclamations of them being Big Ten contenders with Ohio State hard, because we saw 2 bad teams against Wisconsin who we thought were like, oh, we can trust them. But, in the shortened season, anything can happen. And Northwestern, like you said, proves it. And so far this year, they've passed every hurdle, and that's all they can do. So hopefully they can give a good game to an Ohio State team, assuming that happens.
Yeah, it's gonna be very telling to see what happens because for those of you that don't know, the first college football playoff rankings come out on Tuesday this week, and so that's the first clear indicator of where the playoff committee views these teams that are different. That's very different than the AP poll, who's that's a different entity that ranks them based off what they see, and then obviously the college football playoff dictates who makes the championship games and the semifinals and things like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see where they put Northwestern in terms of teams like an Indiana or someone that was already in the top 10 and has a loss. And so now you look at this Northwestern team that's 5-0 and have a very solid top 10 win over Wisconsin. And so I think you could make a very strong case to put a Northwestern team above Indiana and above these Georgias, above Oregon, even though they haven't lost yet. And so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, um, but yeah, I just think there's a lot on the rise for Northwestern so far. They passed their biggest hurdle of the year. The finish line's in front of them. They just got to get there. They can't slip up at any time from here to the end, or else it's wide open once again.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we'll move on to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma pretty much dominated the entirety of this football game. They went up big early on in this game, and we touched on the fact that if Oklahoma was able to score and score consistently in this football game, we didn't think Oklahoma State would have enough offense to keep up with that style of play, and that definitely turned into being the case. But we do want to make the note that Spencer Sanders did leave the game with an injury. He was 10 of 19 for 97 yards and a pick before leaving the game, and then Shane Illingworth came in and was 5 of 21 for 71 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown actually came on the very first possession after Sanders left the game. He came in and Illingworth marched them down the field for a touchdown, but there was no offense basically after that from there on. Chuba Hubbard was limited to 44 yards rushing the football on 8 carries. So that's a very interesting stat line as well. Like, he only got the ball 8 times, but this Oklahoma defense really rose to the occasion and played a very good football game.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two things you said right there. I think one, Oklahoma State is not built from behind to come back from behind, and two, their the Oklahoma Sooner defense came to play. And those two added up to Chuba Hubbard not being able to be a factor in this game, because when you're down, you have to throw to get into the game quickly enough. And it took away all semblance of a run game, which is what Oklahoma State offense is based on. They like to use play action after they establish the run, and they weren't able to do that at all, to the tune of 8 carries for what's basically an All-American running back. And he struggled a little bit recently, and he probably won't be an All-American running back this season, but that's the type of caliber player he is. And when you can't use your best player on offense due to being down, it's a tall task, especially once your quarterback gets hurt as well. And then on the flip side of things, Oklahoma played really well on both sides of the ball. They took care of the ball, and they scored quickly like they do. Spencer Rattler threw 4 touchdowns, and they're on the upswing.
Absolutely. This Oklahoma team is filled with momentum right now. They've played a lot of very good games in a row. They just took a big step forward in taking everything that they need to do to be a representative in the Big 12 championship game. Moving on down the line, that was a huge win for Oklahoma to stay alive in that race. Oklahoma State was ahead of them, so that almost levels it, I think, if not puts Oklahoma a game ahead. I think it's even now in terms of where they stand win-loss wise in that side of things for the Big 12. Spencer Rattler was a huge part of this football game. 17 of 24, 301 yards and 4 touchdowns, like you said. But he spread the ball around really well in this game. 9 different receivers had a catch, receivers, tight ends, running backs, people just getting involved in the game. We didn't necessarily see the huge yardage production we saw out of Marvin Mims, but he had a very solid game as well. And it just so many playmakers and different things on that Oklahoma side. And Lincoln Riley's getting that team rolling, and it's a shame they started off so poorly, because if they were to play this caliber of football for their entire season, I think they would be a team to watch out for sure in this season with the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Lincoln Riley. We talk about how offensively gifted the Oklahoma teams typically are, and how his schemes allow for those great quarterbacks to do great. But they also had a nice performance on the ground today, which, you don't always see from an Oklahoma team. And they had 141 yards and 26 carries from Ramondre Stevenson. So I think if you can supplement the explosive passing game that they have and with a nice game on the ground, that team's going to be really hard to beat for anyone in the country. They may not have a chance. And in fact, they won't have the chance to compete for the college football playoff or maybe even a New Year's Six, but they're peaking at the right time of the season. It's just a shortened year this year. So it's tough because there won't be other bowl games. But this is a team no one would want to face. I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely. That's Oklahoma beating Oklahoma State 41-13 in that one. We'll move to the Pac-12 where this game kicked off late in the day, so I'm sure not a lot of people were up to see it at that point on the East Coast, 10:30 kickoff East Coast. But USC was able to beat Utah 33-17. Utah just looked like a team that hadn't played a game so far this season. They had a lot of inexperience. They started Cam Rising, their redshirt sophomore quarterback, and he started the game and threw an interception pretty badly on a screen pass, overshooting his running back, and then he fumbled on like the 4 yard line after a pretty big hit, and that actually sent him out for the game after that hit. And so at that point, Utah had spotted USC 2 possessions and on one around the 30 and then one on their own 5 yard line. So it was one of those games where Utah was down early and they scored 1 offensive touchdown. Nephi Sewell, returned a fumble for a touchdown and had an interception as well. But they never really competed. Truth be told, the final score looks a lot closer than the game was itself. But also at the same point in time, I was surprised that USC didn't bury them a little bit deeper. I'm surprised they weren't able to score more points. I'm surprised they weren't able to capitalize on some of the possessions that they had a little bit further to really make this a big statement win for them.
Yeah, I mean, those turnovers didn't help, and the injury for Cam Rising obviously made this game an uphill battle. But it wasn't like they were dead immediately when that happened. Obviously, the one at the 4 yard line was basically giving a touchdown. But they were up 3-0. It was 3-3 for a little bit, and USC didn't look good at all either. I mean, they had the fumble that Nephi Sewell returned for a touchdown. Slovis had his mistakes. He threw one horrible throw that actually Nephi Sewell picked off as well, and they're a little off. But Utah was just as we expected in our preview, that you don't play for 11 months of a football game, and then you play a team as talented as USC. It doesn't spell a win. Like, you're not going to win that game. But I think it was even worse than we expected in terms of some of the easy execution that is just X's and O's. Like, you expect some mistakes, just like throwing the ball, some jitters and stuff like that with all the inexperience. But some of the more experienced players were non-factors and some of that's based on coaching and some of that's on the players not doing their jobs as well. But like, for instance, Brant Keithy got a ton of targets late in the game, but his name wasn't called for anything meaningful the entire game. And same can be said for a lot of players on the Utes team, and even USC didn't play a good game, but they were firmly in control, like you said.
It was fairly ugly football, like just from the opening bell to the end, and I think that's a little bit expected in your first game of the season, but also like it just was bad. Like they didn't really look solid at any point in time under either Bentley or Rising at quarterback, and they never felt like they had any sort of command over the offensive part of the football game. Ty Jordan, who's a true freshman at running back, is probably their brightest spot on offense after that football game. He looked very good running the football, looked explosive and physical as well. But then again, like they never really threatened to put this in any sort of jeopardy for the Trojans. Slovis did what he had to do once again, 24 of 35, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. What do we make of him moving forward for this USC team, and what do they have to do to just be a little bit better, be a little bit more complete, and be a little bit more just better, in my opinion? That's a bad way to put it, but yeah.
I agree. I mean, I was unimpressed. So we talked about before the very first game of the Pac-12 season, he's the best quarterback in the Pac-12. And I firmly believe talent-wise that he is. But he's just not throwing the ball well. I think he's a little late. They talked on the broadcast about how he was having trouble with the new balls being slippery. and his balls are like wobbling, and he's late on some throws. And so I don't know exactly what it is, if it's an injury that's bugging him. But Utah wasn't putting any pressure. There was a few plays where he had probably 6 seconds of time because Utah was dropping a deep zone to compensate for all the freshmen they have down there. And I don't care how many people you put back into a zone. If you have USC's wide receivers, the talent that they have, that you've got to be able to pick someone out. Like it's just impossible. It's running zigzags at that point. And they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Tyler Vaughns, and he just still looked off. And then even his touchdown throw to like Cromanhook, the tight end, it was wobbly and just wide open. He benefited from a miscommunication. I'm worried about him, and I don't think that once they play a team like we saw them against Arizona State, who I thought was athletically up to the task to be the USC Trojans team. Their secondary looked like they could limit them. They stopped the run game altogether, and they just had to get a very lucky onside kick. I think that once they play a team that can match them with the requisite athletes, that they're in trouble.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting moving forward to look at what happens with this USC team. But big hurdle overcome for them in this season in the Pac-12 South play. This is, regardless of where Utah's at, the program is still one of the better ones in the Pac-12 South division. So it's a big hurdle for the Trojans to get over. And moving forward, they're now 3-0. That speaks for something. They've won all 3 of their football games. So kudos to them on that. And that final, once again, was 33-17 Trojans. We're going to touch on just a few more quick storylines that we saw throughout the course of the weekend. Real quickly, just needs to be shared. Michigan struggled again this weekend. They needed 3 overtimes to beat a Rutgers team who were both 1-3 entering play yesterday. So that's concerning for that Michigan team. Oregon narrowly beat UCLA at home in a very good game there in Autzen Stadium, 38-35. What did we make of that performance because UCLA's backup quarterback looked good in this one?
I mean, he was the backup, but he looked really good. I didn't mean that as any slight to him. I was unimpressed with Oregon, and I think they got lucky. They were let off the hook in this game. They got an interception where the quarterback just had to throw the ball away, and they probably, I'm not going to say probably, but they very well could have won this football game. And then at the end of the game, there's a drop, a perfect throw from the quarterback for UCLA to extend this game and at least tie it up with a field goal because they would have been in range, and it was a drop. And so Oregon was let off the hook, and I wasn't impressed by them, but I think their defense is getting better. That they're showing signs, and their offense, I think their quarterback just needs time under Joe Moorhead's system. It really simplifies the game for him. I think 3 straight games they've had to play a touchdown on the exact same play, where it's a run pass option. He rolls 2 steps to his left and dumps it off to a big tight end or a tight end on the other side. And some of these reads make the game easy, and I think they're only going to get better, but they haven't shown it either.
Absolutely. A big note in this one for Oregon real quickly is that star freshman linebacker Noah Sewell was carted off the field with an apparent lower leg injury. So that's a big 5-star recruit that they brought in with very high on. He's looked very good on that defense for their first few games. So that's a big loss for the Ducks moving forward. He's not to speculate anything because we don't know for sure, but he's probably going to miss a significant chunk of time with that injury. So that hurts for their defense. That's still missing a lot in the back end of their secondary, and after people opting out and other things to go along there. So some people are going to have to step up there. But once again, Ducks move to 3-0 just like the Trojans do. So they are still going to be the cream of the crop in the Pac-12 North and have that target on their back moving forward. Liberty lost their first game of the season this week. They actually lost with a field goal that was blocked to a chance to win the football game. NC State was able to block the kick and win 15-14, I believe the final score was. And so they have their final loss. I think at this point they'll probably maybe drop out of the top 25 with that loss. But that's one of the Cinderella undefeated stories that ended this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they moved on to the Elite Eight and couldn't quite make the Final Four. Just to liken it to some March Madness, but I feel bad for that team because they really did enough to win that game, and it was a nice play to block a punt, and it was almost poetic because they actually had a kick blocked last time, and then by Virginia Tech, where they upset Virginia Tech, and then they ended up a penalty allows them to take it again and win it. So it was an interesting turn of events, a little dramatic irony there. But yeah, no, it's I was happy to see them have the run and the notoriety that they got for what in a season where they typically wouldn't get it. They at least got some notoriety.
Absolutely, I think Hugh Freeze is a good coach there for Liberty. I think he's doing good things. He's had a little bit of a weird background where some questionable decisions that led him to having to leave Ole Miss and then go to Liberty and all of that stuff, that background there. But it was a very good run. Still having a very fantastic season, and 2-1 against the ACC for a team like Liberty in this year is nothing to be ashamed about. Cincinnati was tested to the max this weekend against UCF. UCF is a team that came in. We knew they could put up points, and they've pretty much branded this group of 5 team that is a powerhouse. And now Cincinnati's kind of riding their coattails off of the legitimacy that UCF proved back in their time when they had undefeated seasons. But Cincinnati was able to hold on and win this game 36-33. Just real quick, your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think it was a tricky game because they were coming in so hot and the UCF team had underperformed, but their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel for UCF, was really good. And Desmond Ridder started off a little slow for the Bearcats, and they were able to overcome it. And they actually had a really interesting last play. I don't know if everyone saw it, but they could have kneeled and played for one last play from the not making the other team go 98 yards. Instead, they fumbled on the last snap, and it could have gotten very interesting. But luckily, they were able to fall on it and move on and winning 36-33.
Yeah, Penn State falls to 0-5 on the season so far after losing to Iowa 41-21. This is the worst start in program history for the Nittany Lions. We talk about what's moving forward for this Penn State team. They play Michigan, who's also on the slide this week. So it's going to be a very, very interesting game, to say the least, for these quote unquote powerhouses in the Big Ten, that one's 0-5 and the other's 2-3. So it's very telling what's happening there in Penn State, and that's now their worst start in program history, like I said. So tough times there in not so happy valley right now for Penn State. Clemson, Florida State was postponed on Saturday morning after a Clemson player tested positive for COVID-19 that morning. Not sure who it was. Health professionals were kind of unable to decide whether or not to play the football game. So just better judgment prevailed, in my opinion, and if you can't decide to actually make sense to logistically play the game, you probably shouldn't be playing the football game. So that didn't happen, and that was one of 15 games this week that was either canceled or postponed due to COVID-19 related issues. So those are a few notes that we saw moving forward in this college football weekend that we wanted to alert you to. And now we'll wrap up our episode here today with our pick results. I have a frowny face next to mine because I went 4-4 this week. It was a 500 week. It's what we get for giving ourselves a pat on the back, right? For going 70% throughout the first 4 weeks of doing this. And there were some close ones. Indiana almost came through for me. Arizona kind of got blown out. That wasn't a very good one. Washington played a good football game there, but you, on the other hand, went 5-3, so I'm only in the hole by 1. But you take the lead on me so far. We're 24-15 for me, 25 and 14 for you, respectively. So what do you make of all that?
I was kind of surprised. I hadn't checked like I knew the games we talked about, but I hadn't really thought about it. I really thought I did better this week. I knew I missed Northwestern, Wisconsin, but I didn't realize that I missed 2 other games off the top of my head. I mean, I focused on the big ones, and it wasn't a great week for me either. I figured Washington was going to play a good game, though. So thank you to the Huskies.
Yeah.
But I will give you some props. I said this at the beginning. You did tell me off air that you thought that one of the 2 Big Ten powerhouses, Wisconsin or Ohio State, was going to lose. So I'll give you some love there. And Wisconsin did lose. So well done.
I should have came out and just picked both of the upsets. Honestly, it would have given myself the benefit of the doubt to hold my hat on that one. But no, it's always fun to look back and see where we're at and have fun with our picks and all that good stuff. So kudos to you, my friend. You take a 1-game lead moving forward. I might have to do the math on that because you might have 2 on me because of Washington and Ohio State. I think you might have 2 on me, but
Yeah, I was a little confused, but I wasn't going to say anything about it.
We'll update that for you in the next one for sure. Be sure to look out for tweets or something from us because we're going to have a very different schedule for you this next week due to Thanksgiving travel dates, the Thanksgiving holiday itself. We're not going to put out an episode on Thursday, the holiday, and we're also going to be previewing some basketball for Feast Week, like we've touched on in the past few weeks. So we're very excited to start bringing you some of those games and prepping you for some college hoops. With that being said, make sure to look out. We'll put a schedule out once we've fully decided when each one's going to come out because they're all kind of up in the air as of right now. But we'll let you know about that, and we will make sure to have you informed before we just dump one on you. So hopefully we can see you then. And Leif, do you have anything else to add before we sign off for the evening?
Yeah, just have a good Thanksgiving. Be safe and keep your ear to the ground for some whenever we put some updates out. We're going to get you some good basketball and football content.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to a week chock full of college athletics and NFL and Thanksgiving food. We're looking forward to it.
Nice little coma. Maybe we'll do a post one rating what was the best dish, and we can compare them to some schools' teams.
Well, I love it. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us. Once again, that's Leif. I'm Scott. This is the College Sports Hive, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Have a good one.